We're closing today with look into the future again. We're going to talk about Ethereum and Bitcoin and the latest developments in terms of building on the ecosystem. I think maybe we shall start with a round of introductions as our speakers arrive.
Sure, I'm Nader Dabit, the Director of Developer Relations at Eigen Labs, and we're the we're the team behind the EigenLayer protocol.
Hello, everyone. My name is Piyush. I'm a sales director at Kiln. We are a yield platform that supports staking and other yield-generating sources. I'm responsible for the MENA region, and happy to see all you guys here.
Ali from p2p.org, also a staking provider, and I have the chance to lead a beautiful team here in the Middle East.
Hey everyone, my name is Piyush. I'm head of ecosystem at BIMA. We are creating like a stablecoin backed by Bitcoin as a collateral.
Hi everyone, Luke Xie here, co-founder of SatLayer. We are building the economic layer for Bitcoin to reinvent the entire economy built on Bitcoin.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. So restaking kicked off at Ethereum, and now Bitcoin clearly wants it. It helped to unlock shared security, a new model of how interoperability and middleware could operate, and new yield. As we see more and more Bitcoin protocols building within same primitive, there's still obviously constraints in terms of design, as well as just very different set of rules which works on Bitcoin. This is changing now. I think there's still a fair question whether we're trying to sort of put a square peg into a round hole. And therefore today, I definitely would like to touch upon that and also just discuss where we're now with restaking, where we're going next, and moving forward, whether Ethereum and Bitcoin will see convergence, competition, or we're actually facing risks which we cannot yet evaluate moving forward. I actually would like to start with an open question to the panel. We've already seen protocols going live with various restaking solutions, with slashing. We see AVSs being built. When we had this discussion first time in Bangkok, that was not the case. So we moved so far in the past 6 months. But the question is, from what you've seen and experienced right now, do you see the primitive of shared security remains, or are we actually going to a completely different direction right now, and actually dynamic of risk-taking and developer position changes?
I'm kind of curious, before I answer the question, why do you feel that that question is necessary? Do you feel that that would be something that people are assuming at the moment, or just out of curiosity?
Yes, actually. I think before it was very kind of infrastructure needed, especially around Ethereum solution, to help to allow cheaper applications to be built.
Got it.
But right now, as we see, there is a lot of financial primitives and new yield opportunities which are appeared much faster scope that we actually have products and AVSs that are ready.
Got it. That's a good question. It's a good conversation, a good topic, actually. Yeah, I mean, the ultimate goal of restaking is kind of a means to an end. The end is essentially a developer platform, and the ultimate end is applications. And really, when we think of applications in crypto, the most of the time what we've seen, and the reason that the growth of developers is flatlined or even declined, is that everything is revolved around a token. So there's token launch pads, and there's Ponzi schemes, and there's forking and redeployment of the exact same DeFi products over and over and over. And we now have not only hundreds, but possibly thousands of L1s and L2s that are all building developer platforms that have equal constraints. There is nothing that you can do in an EVM environment that you can't do in an SVM, and vice versa, for the most part, right? So if you're building an application on a blockchain virtual machine, you are constrained by the environment that you're building. And that means you can't make API calls, you can't talk to the outside world, you can't interact with LLMs, you can't talk to any off-chain services. You are literally constrained, and that's why the developer adoption has stagnated, because people are just unable to build cool stuff. So we have these thousands of or hundreds or thousands of L1s and L2s kind of competing with each other. Restaking actually unlocks the entire internet to be able to inherit the same security of a blockchain, but they can build with any programming language that they want. They can talk to any service, they can talk to any API. And just in the last 6 months, like you said, we've seen an explosion in revenue, even of ABSs themselves. Like we're rapidly approaching, I would say, with Aether coming online soon, close to $500 million in revenue for ABSs just on EigenLayer. And EigenLayer mainnet has only been here for like less than, or exactly, I guess, 1 year, and we only shipped slashing 2 weeks ago. So I don't think there is a place to build that's better right now if you're a developer, in order to kind of have the scope of what's possible and to actually build real applications that generate revenue that are already, like, this isn't conceptually, like we have the top apps on the App Store in the finance like section for instance, with Earnify. We have the founder of Reddit building a new version of a social network on EigenLayer, with the ZK-TLS underneath. We have, I would say, around 100 of what we would consider like blue chip applications that are being built, and it's still extremely early. So I think I think maybe it's people are just so used to building crypto applications as a smart contract that this new paradigm is still kind of somewhat like alpha for the people that kind of understand it. They're taking advantage of it, but I do feel like the growth here is going to be, exponential, and over the next year, now that we're kind of getting to the place where we need to be. But ultimately, the problem that we still have is the developer, like I would say, for a developer to build something, the barrier to entry is still a little high. So building on EigenLayer is still somewhat complex because of you have to deal with operators and operator sets. So we're abstracting that away. There are other teams abstracting that away. What we ultimately are going to be at a place is where you write your code, you deploy it to EigenLayer, and it executes and it runs, and you don't have to worry about any of the underlying infrastructure, just like AWS Lambda allows serverless functions to be run, and the developer can just focus on what they want to build. All of the infrastructure is managed for them. That's kind of where we're headed. And when that happens, then we're going to see kind of a new wave of innovation, in my opinion, and it's going to be powered by restaking.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I guess
Luke,
let me jump
please.
in then. Yeah, I think definitely agree with a lot of the points that Nader has made. I think at the end of the day, restaking is still a very new primitive that's not very well understood, right? And so I think for us at SatLayer, we kind of take a bit more opinionated view on the early use cases, so maybe a little bit more of like the Solana DNA. And so we actually embrace DeFi use cases for restaking, because I think one way to think about restaking is it basically is a fully programmable wrapper on any asset. And so for us, we kind of went for principles and decided, well, let's just use the best asset in the space or potentially in the history of humanity, Bitcoin, right? And so that's why for us, we are very much focused on kind of making Bitcoin fully programmable so that you can unlock all these interesting use cases. And so two of the big use cases that we've been focusing and spending a lot of time on, one is insurance. Because again, when you think about restaking mechanisms, right, slashing, right, and the kind of collateral itself, it actually functions very similar to how an insurance fund operates, where the slashing is basically the insurance payouts, right? The restake collateral is kind of the entirety of the insurance fund. And so that's where it gets super interesting in terms of what you can do. So the examples here would be providing kind of insurance / being a lender of last resort for lending protocols. So that one, you directly increase users' TVL loans of their existing over-collateralized lending products, but is also one of the missing pieces to unlock under-collateralized loans, one of the holy grails of crypto. But for this insurance use case and for the restake Bitcoin that we have, this is just the start, right? You can kind of do the same thing with perp dexes and kind of being the backstop lending last resort, for example, for Hyperliquid, and then actually offer slashing insurance, not just for other restaking protocols, but for slashing in general, right? We can also even offer slashing insurance for ourselves by segregating the kind of the vault that contains like the restaked Bitcoin that's insuring us from everything else, right? In terms of like the TVL on us. And then I think one of the other big use cases that we're working on is basically the concept of what in TradFi is called liquidity float, right? So essentially kind of using this big pool of restaked Bitcoin that we have to take duration risk, right? So kind of the everyday example here is like payday loans, right? People pay a premium to get access to liquidity faster than what their paycheck allows, right? But the bank, et cetera, would actually charge some interest because they're taking on their duration risk of waiting for the paycheck to hit. So when you apply this concept, there's literally infinite use cases, right, where people are willing to pay a premium for early liquidity, right? It's things like cross margining, right? It's bigger things like even just PayFi in general, right? Or even you can think about applied to bridging, right? So instead of having to wait 20 minutes for an asset, you can now get it right away, right? And then kind of the restaked Bitcoin here is waiting for the settlement to kind of make itself whole. So I think overall we are looking and prioritizing on use cases that generate revenue on a daily basis, right? So the yield is super real when it comes to restaking, and then it's really starting from here to expand out what restaking can really do.
Thank you. And Piyush, so you guys also building within Bitcoin restaking primitive, and you also went far long way with stablecoin. And how do you guys? What's your take on the recent changes in restaking?
Yeah, I think in general, when it comes to restaking, be it what SatLayer is doing, be it what EigenLayer recently enabled with Lombard. So I think in general, I think restaking makes sense. And even we ourselves as a stablecoin can do, restake it and use it as a collateral for, securing ABSs or networks built out of these restaking platforms. So I guess stablecoin as a utility perspective for these platforms, I guess totally makes sense. Thank you. So in general, I guess it's going great. But apart from these okay, first we will create like a LRT kind of, let's say in our case, in our stablecoin, which we are already working with Symbiotic. And we will be even working with SatLayer, probably EigenLayer, if they enable other tokens to accept as a collateral to secure networks. And further kind of even like aggregations of these restaking platform. Like recently, Catalysis announced that they will be working with many of the restaking platforms, which is kind of, I guess, cool for being a stable to use for like directly using Catalysis for, just zooming out all the restaking platforms and, picking choose as per the, ABS or whatever they are choosing for their restaking. So I guess in general, being a stable, this is kind of a novel approach for us to choose just directly one or maybe combine many of them.
And then more on the operation side, I think also you guys kind of been seeing those evolvements on, I guess, on the demand side from the services you provide, and especially Slash and now goes live. There's a lot of questions about the risk profiles. And just before we delve into what it looks like in detail. So Ali, maybe let's start with you, how you guys see the changes in dynamic.
Yeah, first of all, I think we should try to understand who is interested by the restaking. And just, if you allow me to ask the audience, who here are more on the builder side? Like when I say builder is whether working with the protocols on the product side, and who are more like investors looking for yields. Okay, can you just raise hands, product, infrastructure, and builders? Okay. And investors looking for yield, optimizing yields. A little bit less, but we'll still consider you here as you are in the room. And well, when you're a builder, you see restaking as a perfect opportunity to benefit from the security from large infrastructure like Ethereum and now Bitcoin as well. Having like a chain backed by the power of BTC is just phenomenal when you're a builder, because what you want to provide is reliability, security for your platform, so your users can benefit from it in the most secure way. When you're an investor, you are always chasing for more yields with the more mitigated risk, or at least if you want to take like higher risk, you need to have like full visibility or have a model that is transparent enough for you to be able to understand it, but also anticipate it. Because high risk, high rewards, why not? But if you don't know how big is the risk, why would you chase for a double-digit return if you have like no visibility at all? I don't think like a risk manager will allow that. So what I want to conclude on your question is that when you are like a builder, restaking should really be understood as a perfect tool, while as an investor, you need to have like, we are still not ready to fully provide what the investors needs here. And when it comes to the risk, it's not only the risk as an for the AVSs or the operators to sustain, but also for the third-party providers. And right now, I think we are really missing perhaps like third-party agencies. If you think like the TradFi model, like Moody's Analytics or whatever, people that are like outside of the ecosystem, but that has like all the knowledge in an unbiased way to kind of rate the different products, so the users or the investors are in a position where they can choose like a product and have like a full visibility on the reason why they will choose this one and not another one. And from a infrastructure provider, we need to find the way to provide like value to both parties, because as a staking provider, of course, we want to find sustainable models for operators. We want the protocols to grow, to sustain, so they can also use our service, because that's where we bring value. And for the users, of course, they need to meet us halfway.
I just want to echo exactly what Ali said, and thank you for qualifying that there are a few investors here, but mainly builders. Put it in more context, at Kiln, we operate 5% of all the Ethereum validators, and that means these are our clients who are looking for more yield. And if you're a builder out there, I just want to kind of highlight what are the key things they look for, as you are now obviously going to provide that value to those end stakers. What they really care about is the reward versus the risk. And the risk is broken down into three things. These are three things the client evaluates before they make a decision whether they want to be exposed to that risk. The first thing is, what is the value at risk? So when they deploy their, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other economic security, they care about the rewards, and then what's the value at risk if something goes wrong. And the second thing is, what is the probability of that risk to happen? So what are the key activities that causes a slashing event? And the third thing, and this is where the staking service provider comes in, is what are we doing to reduce that probability close to zero and make the investor comfortable in earning that additional yield? So as builders, when you're building on restaking platforms, it's very important to have a slashing model which an infrastructure provider is able to digest and then communicate that to the end staker. I just paint a picture of what kind of end user we're talking about here. These are usually exchanges who are offering rewards to the end users. So when they go into Binance or any other popular exchange to offer yield, that's usually provided by an infrastructure provider like Kiln or P2P. Then we also have custodians and other large institutions. It's not degens who know everything by heart. These are large institutions where there are multiple decision makers and people who can say no if they don't understand the risk. So from a building perspective, the slashing mechanism and what causes slashing is a very, very big topic. And even though slashing has been enabled quite recently on EigenLayer, still a little bit unclear how to define different risk models when you support multiple AVSs, while they haven't really necessarily published all their slashing mechanisms. So as a builder, besides the application you're building, the risk model around that is also very, very important. But also the utility. Long-term rewards based on inflation only makes it also very difficult to provide the longevity of the rewards they're going to earn by absorbing that risk. So what we're seeing with other platforms is that we're looking for that additional rewards that comes from the utility, not only the inflation rewards, right? So that's also very, very important, is because we have questions around how sustainable is the subsidies, which are usually through inflation of a token. And when they're seeing that this inflation is not going to last forever, it becomes a quite challenging conversation to make them excited. But that's what we're seeing from the demand side.
Yeah, and just to jump in, so that's one of the reasons why we're focusing on insurance as a big use case for restaking, right? For a lot of the institutional clients, to be able to have some limits on the value at risk, right? Or potentially actually cover the entire value at risk.
So basically, I think operators and curators like P2P and Kiln, like in general, makes our life easy to mitigate like risk at their end. So basically, okay, in our case as well, like we are working with a couple of curators and operators. So let's say when we restake our stable for utilizing it further to, let's say, securing a network, I guess via these guys, it's super smooth that okay, they already mentioned that these are the risks involved. And if you do this, this can happen. So I think all the scenarios are kind of listed. So it's make our lives easy for restaking as an asset. Yeah.
Yeah, the question about the risk and who is responsible for providing like a risk model, I think that's an important topic. As a staking provider, for our clients, we kind of have the responsibility to provide like a risk models, but it's not that easy because there is not only the economical aspect, there is also like the legal one. Right now, we are still in a gray zone when it comes to DeFi, not only here in the Middle East, but in all the different regions in the world. So the question is, who should be responsible toward their clients, but toward the markets? And right now, I believe that a hybrid models, and that's what P2P started to do, when not curating vaults, but co-curating vaults with asset managers that have experience in building like risk models, managing funds, etc., and building like different like risk versus benefit products. And step by step, I really believe that then infrastructure providers and even validators can tend to become an asset manager. But we need to keep learning, building, and more importantly, build like a proper framework. So not only we understand each other's responsibility, but really understand like the economical, legal, and technical aspect of that.
Is it fair to say then we've started years ago talking about decentralization and shared security, but actually this is how I've started with my first question. The reality is right now we completely discounted decentralization element of it, and we're talking business here. And I would say, Nader, let's start with you because you work with builders a lot. And actually, do you think there's a complete break? I actually didn't expect to ask this question. Do you think there's a huge break in incentives between those who actually want to leverage the tech and build product and the financial infrastructure that feeds into availability of that?
I'm not sure the question. Can you reframe that in a tiny way and then give it to me in a slightly different way?
Do you think there is break in incentives between the builders who choose to go towards?
Oh, got it. Okay. So as a developer, I mean, I'm a software developer for 13 years, and I've launched and sold companies, and I've done everything, and in the sun at this point. The incentive for developers is, mainly I want to build something and I want it to be profitable, and I want to, make money and be successful. That's like probably the main thing. If I like talk to every single developer out there, that's probably the main question. You also have people that enjoy. They enjoy maybe like being creative. They want to kind of be expressive and express their ideas in the form of code and build stuff, and they enjoy it as well. So you have those developers as well. So I think ultimately, if you kind of dial it in, like what is the reason that people want to build? They want to build successful applications. And I think that this is the perfect place to build that. And I think we're, again, just now starting to kind of see that come to fruition because developers in crypto are very, very well known for just launching and then creating a token, and that's the only thing that they have. That there is no value in the thing that they built. The token is gonna like promise that in 10 years they're gonna change the world, and then they sell over the counter, and then they go retire, and then the next one comes in, right? That's kind of what we see in crypto, right? So, but what we actually want are people to build revenue-generating applications that are valuable to the average person, and they don't necessarily even need to know that they are crypto applications. Obviously, DeFi is an incredible use case that doesn't fall into that bucket of negativity that I just mentioned. But what if we want to kind of expand outside the scope of DeFi? So I think, again, if you kind of look at some of the primitives that are enabled by restaking, like zkTLS, we're already, again, seeing dozens of applications that generate real revenue. And we're also seeing dozens of services that generate real revenue. And I think that when developers kind of understand that, and we lower their barrier to entry for building there, then the growth is going to kind of happen. And if you kind of look at the pie of developers, again, that all of the L1s and L2s are fighting over, they're fighting, you have literally probably 1,000 networks fighting over around 50,000 developers. But there are in the world tens of millions of developers that write other languages that don't write smart contracts. Restaking lets those developers build software with the same verifiability, but without the constraints. And we kind of need the world to kind of know that. And it's still very early. And that's why we've only seen a subset of these successful products start to come. But I think in a year from now, like the goal of us is to kind of 1,000x that, make it so much easier to build that you know, it is kind of, the vision is kind of like, you know, a reality. So no, I don't think there is I think the incentives are 100% there. We just need to kind of tell the world about it and make it easier and easier to build. Because again, like right at this moment, Opacity is successful and they're generating tens of millions of dollars of revenue, but these guys are like cracked engineers, like probably some of the best developers in the world. We want everyone to kind of have that same access. And to do that, we just need to make it easier to build. And that's exactly what we're focused on this year. And I think a lot of other, you know, restaking platforms are probably would agree with me.
Since we're discussing Ethereum versus Bitcoin, Luke, can I get your take on that as well, please?
Yeah, I mean, I'll get into Ethan versus Bitcoin in a second, but I think overall, you know, I've been full-time in the space since 2017. I think everyone's just gotten a lot more pragmatic, right? I think we've kind of swung between full decentralization, full centralization, and I think to Nader's point, like if you're a developer, at the end of the day, you just care about building on something that works and building on something that's not like pulling teeth and super painful, right? And like everything else, I think is additional kind of nice to haves, but those two are like the kind of bare minimum. And then I think in addition, you know, when it comes to decentralization, it's actually not that straight. It's not black and white. It's not that straightforward, right? For anyone that's been part of a DAO, like usually the DAO just ends up like ghosting over time because you can't get enough people to sign to multi-sig, like votes don't pass quorum, right? Like a lot of the stuff, it sounds great in theory, and then you try it out. Like it's like any democracy, right? Democracy is messy. Democracy is generally not very efficient, not very fast. And so I think in the entire space, especially for earlier stage builders, earlier stage teams, it's everyone's centralized, right? Because if every key decision has to go through a vote, you just will die as a project. And so I think overall, we're I think finding the happy medium where it's like as a protocol gets large enough, right? As teams get large enough, then you need to work on better governance, but it's like doing that at the right time so that you can maintain your speed. Because I think if there's one thing that's been clear from this recent cycle, it's about speed of execution, right? Much more than like, you know, painting a nice picture or having a nice architecture.
Absolutely. I think it's now that we're looking at the future, and there's definitely a lot of questions around the underlying infrastructure, and especially that, you know, when we see more and more Bitcoin products. That being said, when we talk about share security, composability, there is basically programmability on Ethereum, and it made a lot of sense with how Restaking was solving for something which was a pain point within Ethereum ecosystem. It's not really the case for Bitcoin in a sense that it's a completely different story in terms of how you can communicate with network and you can build about it. So the question really is, do we now see that it has changed and we have solutions that could make sense for restaking on Bitcoin, or is it going to go more towards DeFi play per se, and maybe institutions?
Yeah, I think it's really, to answer your question, I think it's both. And then I think the detail is, I think what sometimes is a hot take, sometimes I think with some audiences not, is, I've kind of adopted the view that ETH is testnet for Bitcoin. Because I think at this point, I don't think anyone in the room, right, would want to challenge the fact that Bitcoin is definitely the best asset in crypto, period, bar none. And I think, so then it makes sense for, all these kind of DeFi primitives, DeFi infrastructure, and just, kind of financial infrastructure in general, right, that certainly were pioneered, right, and created on ETH, to now be adopted to Bitcoin, right? Because at the end of the day, for DeFi, if you're not using the best asset in this space, then why are you using second best, third best, fourth best? And so that's, I think, one of the core ethos of this new Bitcoin ecosystem is like, let's take all our learnings from ETH, from Solana ecosystem, right? From, kind of other alt layer 1 ecosystems, right? Take the latest and greatest and bring it now to the best asset that I think, basically all of us started with when we entered the space, right? And, it's kind of open secret that a lot of founders of various projects, even various L1s, all have a ton of Bitcoin, all are closet Bitcoin maxis, right? Because at the end of the day, no one can argue, I think, with the point that Bitcoin is the best store of value, right? We not only have individuals, we have institutions adopting it, we have nation states holding Bitcoin, right? As for the asset itself, right? So now let's actually make the asset more useful. Let's actually plug it into DeFi and even TradFi infrastructure, right? So that it's not just sitting as purely digital gold, but actually being utilized.
I just want to add from my perspective is that Bitcoin restaking has already been here earlier than EigenLayer or restaking platforms in the sense of like wrapped Bitcoin. And it's already been used in DeFi and other chains. So that concept is not necessarily new from investors holding Bitcoin. They've always looked for ways to earn yield on it one way or another. And with the introduction of Symbiotic and other restaking platforms like EigenLayer and everything in between, the opportunity to generate value has just broadened and giving the investors more choice. And with introduction of other more close to the restaking platforms like Babylon with Lombard LBTC, we're now seeing the shift change from Bitcoin being just like wrap Bitcoin to you should actually start using it as economic security for other restaking platform. Maybe I think I heard you guys are supporting LBTC now on EigenLayer, right? That was one of the recent announcements. So that's just a great example of how the mindshare is shifting on Bitcoin. But what I'm saying is that the early adopters are not necessarily our institutional clients. It's still the crypto natives who are getting hands on to this. And the reason why I say this is because a lot of the institutions, going back to Ali's point, is that they have to go through the whole legal process, right? Whether it's an exchange, a fund, custodian, they have to be able to meet a legal regulator's requirement on can they actually be exposed to a liquid token. And when you're speaking to regulators, most of them don't even know what staking is. And they have to explain to them what is restaking. And I guess talk about this from an experience. If you look at the kind of like the highest tier of financial products, which are in Europe, ETPs, they're just been staked ETPs. And these staked ETPs, their key performance indicator is how much fees they can take off the staking rewards. So while they themselves are very keen on getting more rewards, the conversations with the regulators can't even pass by the topic of yield that is not in Ethereum. So that legal paperwork boring barrier is still there. And this is why we're currently mainly seeing crypto native businesses who don't need to report to anybody being their first early adopter. And then there's going to be like a long 1 to 2 years lagging indicator before we see institutions adopting it. Institutions want to adopt it. There's always a regulator who's asking, what is restaking? And I have been working in prior Kiln at Chainalysis, which is one of the largest anti-money laundering blockchain analytics company. And my main job was to communicate with exchanges how they can should speak to these regulators in terms of what tools they're using to meet the requirement. And it's a very, very long process. And I think the process will be very similar here, that large institutions will be lagging very, very far behind with adopting liquid staked Bitcoins.
Yeah, kind of I agree with both, because when it comes to DeFi coming on, like being a lending or borrowing protocol ourselves, where we altogether forked Morpho, because Morpho charge a lot. When you borrow against your, let's say, LBDC on Morpho, you have to like pay 10, 12%. In our case, we are enabling for 1%. So I think when it comes to using lending, borrowing, and creating in via AVS or restake fashion, which I believe some things are going on internally at the engineering front, which even SatLayer and we guys are also discussing. But I think even on the institution front, what Kiln like is doing is also good. Like in general, it's slow. I agree, totally agree. Just because all the institutions they don't want their Bitcoin to be loose in any fashion. They want, okay, we are in, but we want risk-free yields. Now, even risk-free yields, even in case of restaked or staked assets, there is a risk involved. Like we can say that at certain level there is risk-free, but if slashing happens, then their collateral has to be cut down as well. So I think in general they are slow. I agree, but both are at least talking. That's good. Even like there are many miners, specifically Bitcoin miners. They don't know even staking. So there are like some who knows, at least that's good, but they don't know even staking. They are kind of like, okay, we have Bitcoin, now what to do? You have to teach them from scratch. So I think, yeah, as of now, we are doing just education stuff to them and hoping that they will eventually come.
Sorry, just to add on to that. I think, for anyone that's done enterprise sales, you guys know this, which is it's slowly, but then all at once, right? I think we've seen many cases where, something is novel and new, right? But once like the first kind of more forward-thinking institution does it, then the conversation among all the other institutions is like, wait, what's our restaking strategy? Like, why are we not doing this? What's our view on this, right? I think we saw this with Bitcoin adoption recently with the ETFs, right? As soon as BlackRock did it, then like every single ETF issuer is scrambling to launch their own version of a Bitcoin ETF. We saw it with like, gaming and the metaverse previously. It was like, everyone's like, what is our metaverse strategy? And so I think certainly for restaking, right? I think it will happen fairly soon because it's, in the case of the miners, so some of the miners are actually restakers in SatLayer, right? Are part of our TVL. And a lot of times, I think there's some interesting macro trends and kind of tailwinds, especially on the Bitcoin side, which is the benchmark rate for Bitcoin is going up, right? And that's from the ability now to kind of stake and restake your Bitcoin and get yield that is no longer just based on like delta neutral strategies, where you have much more value at risk of getting exercised, especially in crypto. And so now that you have this, I think the expectations recently too with liquid fund managers is now you're expected to outperform Bitcoin, right, more than anything else, right? But then a lot of LPs are telling funds that the funds can't just hold Bitcoin because it's very easy to access Bitcoin, whether via ETFs or centralized exchanges. So like, why am I paying your fees for you just to buy and hold Bitcoin for me? And so I think there's a lot of tailwinds to now people seeking more of kind of, more native than, let's say, delta neutral strategy in terms of yield on Bitcoin.
So very quick one.
Sorry, guys, we're out of time. Yes, please.
Okay, I'll be as quick as possible. One thing quite interesting that we didn't touch is that we talk about Bitcoin restaking, Ethereum restaking, but I believe, and I humbly believe, that we shouldn't try to compare Bitcoin restaking and Ethereum restaking. And I mean, like, at the end, it's human. I mean, like, we all want to have comparison. We need like points of references, etc. But what Bitcoin wants to achieve and what Ethereum wants to achieve are two completely different concepts, and both are legit. And here to keep growing. So Bitcoin restaking, Ethereum restaking, considered differently, is the start of like the growth. I don't know how really to explain, and if people here see what I mean, but we need to understand what Bitcoin is here to achieve, and how people are considering it, why people are holding Bitcoin, and same for Ethereum. And that way we will build, and it's not a problem to build like two completely different concepts with the same with the same idea and value that we want to bring at the end, which is shared security, enhanced yield, and all the things that we just discussed. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
So I guess the summary is the pegs could belong to the square and the circles to the hole, and everybody can exist peacefully together.
Why not? Otherwise, we wouldn't be all here sitting here.
Well, thank you very much, guys. It was a pleasure having you all. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.